Hello everyone, today we are doing another BGCSE past paper review. Today we are reviewing a biology paper. It is a paper 2 from the year 2016. In fact, this is almost like a last minute study. So again, before I start the examination, please remember to write your school number, your candidate number, your surname and your initials. Also, please read through the instructions carefully. And if you have any queries or any form of doubt, please clarify those with the examiner before you start the examination. All right, so let's jump into question number 1. And question number 1 said that the diagram below represents the shoot of a flowering plant, which is a sailor's cap. All right, so the question now asks that for part A, it said that name the class of flowering plants to which this plant belongs. And if you look at the plant carefully, you're going to notice a few things. Now, notice the type of leaves, notice the petals as well. And based on the broad leaf and the 5 petals, we know that this is a dicotyledon plant. The root system is not shown, so we cannot use a root to describe that. All right, so we know for sure, based on the leaf and also the flower, it is a dicotyledon plant. All right, so it's a dicotyledon. It's to give 2 reasons for your answer in A1. And looking at the plant, you know that for sure you only see 2 things, only the leaf and the flower. So you can only describe this based on the leaf and the flower. So look carefully and well, there are 2 things about the leaf. We can actually separate those. So notice the flower, we have 5 petals. The leaf is broad and we have branching veins. So any of those 3 will work for that section. All right, so let's quickly put that in. So yes, we have broad leaves. So we have broad leaves. We also have branching leaf veins. So let's put that in bracket here. So we also have branching leaf veins. All right, so branching leaf veins. All right, we have, and a matter of fact, those could be 2 separate points, just to make a note of that as well. And what we have here, we have 5 petals. So flower with 5 petals. So flower with 5 petals. All right, so 5 petals. All right, and you can just write 5 petals. All right. Now for part 3, here it asks now is a complete the diagram above by drawing and naming the type of root system found in this plant. So I'm going to draw and name. All right, I think I'm going to name it first, then I draw it. I think, yeah. So the type of root system that will be in this plant, it is a taproot. So this is a taproot system. All right, so it's a taproot. All right, and so to draw this, let me just change the color to probably something look more rooty. All right, there's no color to look rooty, but let's go with that color. All right, roots are not purple, but let's just use purple. All right, so you're going to draw a root system like that. And notice what I'm doing is a continuous root, something going straight down, and attached to that, going straight down, we have some branch just stuff. So we're gonna have some other branch, smaller branch root coming from that main root. So you have a main root system, and attached to that main root system, you have some smaller roots that are branching from that main root system, and it's called a taproot. Okay, so that's pretty much what a taproot looks like. All right, you don't have to be curvy like mine. You could go straight down and then you branch them off. It really don't matter. Roots may take different paths in different soil based on where it is growing. So if it's encounter a rock, it may turn away from the rock and so on. Right? So you don't have to be curvy like mine. It could be straight down. All right, it really don't matter. Once you have that main root part, then the branch that attach to it. All right, once those branches attached to it. So yeah, so that's a 2 mark. Easy, 2 marks. All right, for part B now, it said the diagram show longitudinal section of 2 different seeds. So we have seed A and seed B. Now, based on experience, I could tell you that seed A is a corn. All right, I just know corn seed look like, and most of us will look at it and know there's a corn seed, right? The other name for corn is maize. So the scientific name for corn is Zea maize, right? So it's a corn seed. All right, so just to make a note right there. For B, it looks like a bean seed. So it could be a kidney bean. So let's say beans or peas. So there's a peas seed. All right, so there's a pea seed. All right, yeah. All right. So what he asks us to do now, let's see what he's asking us to do here. It said draw a label line X to the cotyledon in one of the seed. All right, so I could just name a cotyledon in both of them one time, right? So for seed A, the cotyledon going to be here, and for seed B, the cotyledon going to be there. Okay, so we're going to label those. So, and it's in one of the seeds, so I'm just going extra with everything. Again, we are studying. We're not answering the question just by answering the question alone. Just giving some extra information as well, right? Yeah. So cotyledon for seed A is that, and for seed B is this one. And remember, based on examination, please follow the instructions carefully. All right, I'm just giving you extra because we are studying. All right. Now, this part of this seed here is called the endosperm. So this is, I'm gonna label it right inside here. This is called the endosperm. You should be able to hold inside here. All right, that's the endosperm there. All right, so monocotyledon seeds, which is seed A, is a corn. Corn is a monocot. All right, they have endosperm and they have cotyledon as well, right? There are some other things about the seed. Let me just quickly label all of them, all right? All right, so at least you have those. All right, so let me put some other stuff. So notice here we have the outer layer of this. I'm gonna put the outer layer of that, and we have the outer layer of this as well. So I'll put them separate places. We have two things right here. I'm gonna see if I could leave them side by side. We have two here as well. That's the inner one, and then we have the outer one. All right, so I'm gonna label that. Here we have this leaf-looking section of this leaf, and here we have this little tail-looking thing of this leaf. It's not a tail in it, I'm just saying look like a tail. So don't tell nobody that I tell you that seeds have tail. I said tail-like or tail-looking like, right? All right. So labeling now, for the corn, this is what they call the pericarp. Okay, so this is the pericarp. All right, so this is called the pericarp, the outer layer of the corn. All right, and so we also call this the kernel of the corn. So that's another name we could give to the seed. All right, so this now is very important. This outer layer of that little piece that's going out is actually called a plumule sheath. Okay, so this is the plumule sheath. All right, so just to make a note of that. All right, don't mind it going over to the next side here. All right, why not? Let me kind of push it down to the bottom here. All right, so plumule sheath. All right, and then this now is actually the plumule. So easy way to kind of remember where the stuff will be is really to know that plumule is always most likely to the top part of the seed itself, right? All right, so I'm going to see. I don't know why this is not allowing me to write in this. All right, let me get back into it one more time. All right, so this is the plumule. All right, you know what? Let me write it for you. All right, so something decided to go wrong. That's how life is sometimes, but we're not going to stop. So this is the plumule actually. All right, so this is a plumule. All right, typing is faster for me with this thing. All right, so that's a plumule. All right, let's see if we could go back to typing now. And then this one here, is called the radical. Oh, I think I know why. The drawings, the amount of drawings that I put in, I should actually type everything first, and I draw the lines. All right, so this is the radical here. So it is radical. All right. So this is the radical. And the radical forms the root, and the plumule form the shoot. Okay, just to make a note of that as well. All right, at the bottom here, we have a special covering, just like how the plumule sheet will cover the plumule to protect the plumule. The radical also have a covering as well, but it's not called a radical sheath. I mean, that would be a good way to name it though, but of course, scientists come up with some names that will let you wonder sometimes, right? So this is called the colorizer. So this is a colorizer. Colorizer is the sheath that covers the radical in the monocot, and it covers it to protect it while it is germinating, because it's a young and tender root, so definitely needs some form of protection. All right, so for this seed now, is a tester. Okay, thank God I get the type. Okay, so that's the tester right there. This here now is the plumule for the dicotyledon plant, and here is the radical. Oh, all right. I see what's happening is inside the thing. So this is the radical. All right. And again, the cotyledon is right there. All right. So that's the labeling for both seeds And we're going to talk about some different functions about them. So let me see what they ask first, and I'll give you the extra stuff afterwards. All right, so let's draw a line, line X. So again, when you draw the cotyledon, you need to label them X, okay? So you don't need to write out the word cotyledon. So draw a line X to the cotyledon in one of the seeds. So all you need to do is to draw a line and label it X, right? So again, you need to follow the instructions of the examination. Please follow the instructions. All right, I'm just going through this for knowledge purpose, right? We are studying together. All right, so now for part 2, it's how many cotyledons are typically found in seed A. Seed A is a corn, is a monocot, so we want to find 1 in this one. You can write a number or word, it don't matter. And for seed B, is a dicotyledon, and di means 2, so you're going to have 2 seed leaves. So cotyledon is actually what they call seed leaves, right? All right. Part 3 now, it said, state the function of the cotyledon in seed A and seed B. Now, they are different in both seeds. Okay, the cotyledon will be different in terms of function. So in seed A, which is the monocot, the purpose for that is actually to pass the food to the growing region. So in that, it passes the food to the growing regions, okay? And the growing regions will be what they call the embryo, right? Which include the radicle and the plumule. And for seed B, which is the dicotyledon, it actually stores food. So it stores food, particularly in the form of starch. Okay, so it stores food, particularly in the form of starch. All right, and of course, it'll be other substance in it, but the major food storage in the seed is starch. All right, there'll be fats as well, or lipids, and also some form of proteins as well. And these are all the nutrients that the seed will need for germination, because remember what in germination the seed is not photosynthesizing, so the food that is required to grow and develop, they are stored inside of this seed itself. All right, so we're good with that. All right, so next question, so that's the last part of that question. So for question number 2 now, so the diagram represents a food web found in a rocky shore ecosystem. So this is from a rocky shore ecosystem, and we have organism A, we have human, we have a seagull, we have crab, we have periwinkle. And just to make a note for you, if you don't know what periwinkle is, it's a kind of a smaller shell organism, a mollusk, just looking like diagram B, but it's smaller and more pointed. All right, it's a more pointier type of mollusk compared to B. So B is a little bit different than periwinkle. All right, but they're actually similar, as we mentioned. If you notice, they're doing similar thing. The periwinkle plus organism B, they actually eat X, and then the crab might eat them as well, because pretty much they're the same thing, right? All right. Let's jump down into the next part. Actually, see what they're actually asking us. Identify organism X. So organism X, because of the mollusks, we know for sure, and of course the chiton, they eat algae. So this is going to be algae. All right, so this is going to be algae. All right, for sure. And algae can be a producer, right? Because when algae photosynthesize, they have chlorophyll. All right, so next part of question now, it asks us to, let's see what it's asking us to do. So for part B, it's a describe. No, okay, yeah, okay, I should write on a line. For algae, let's put algae on a line for A. For B now, it's a describe what would happen to the food web if organism X disappear completely. Mercy. If all of X gone, look at the food web carefully. If the algae starts a food web and the algae is gone, completely disappeared, Jesus, then all the other organisms have no food at all. And so what do you think will happen? Yeah, no food will be there. So definitely the organism will definitely also suffer. So describe what will take place here. So as a 2-mark question, I think. Yeah, 2 marks. So the first thing for 2 marks, going a little bit too fast past the question, right? So for 2 marks, 1 point could have been here. So at first point, I will say you state that no food will be available, no food. And you can put energy as well, because if there's no food, there's no energy, right? So no food or energy will be available for the organisms, right? for the other, let's say other organisms, because all of them will depend upon the the algae or the producer itself. So no food will be available for the organisms. Okay. All right. None at all. All right. So that's a one point right there. Another point you can talk about here, or I just continue with this, is that the organism, the population will decrease. So the organism population, population population will decrease. Okay. Yeah, so all of the population will be decreased. All right, so the organisms populations will let's what I said them, all of them will decrease. Another thing will happen again, that the possibility there is that the organisms may become extinct. They may die. So the organisms may die or become extinct. Okay, die or extinct. So whichever one of them. All right. So yep, yeah. So no food. Definitely no food. Definitely, all organisms will suffer. Population will decrease eventually, and yes, they may die or decrease in population. All right. Part C is a state the name of organism A and B. So let's go back to organism A and B. And for organism A, it is a chitin for sure. All right, so for diagram B now, this one is kind of a funny to identify because I can't see clearly in terms of what is happening right at the edge here. Normally, if you see two pointy thing on it, it will be a bleeding tooth, but we cannot identify as a bleeding tooth. As a matter of fact, this one looks smooth, so I'm not even going to say bleeding tooth. But this one here, based on the color pattern as well, if it's black and white, it's called a West Indian top shell. All right, so I'm going to keep it as being black and white type of shell. And so it's a West, and based on the size, as a matter of fact, too, I'm going to keep it as West Indian top shell. So this one is a chitin, A is a chitin. All right, so we sure about our chitin there. And we have, again, we say it's West Indian top shell. So let's put it up here. It's going to be a long space. So it's going to be the West Indian top shell. All right. All right. So that's what it is. All right. So we have that there. So part D now is said, part D one, in fact, is a suggest what would happen to the population of organism A if this organism was overfished by humans. So even though suggestion of, even look at the question we stated, suggest what would happen to the population of organism A if the organism was overfished by human beings. So if human overfish it, then only one thing could happen there is that going to be decreased. The population will decrease. So I guess that's again is like a giveaway type of question for you. All right. So if you overfish it, decrease. Overfish means that you take more than what can be reproduced, right? So you're taking a lot of organism more than our faster rate, taking out more or at a faster rate than what they can, than how they can reproduce. All right. So the rate of removal is greater than the rate of reproduction. So think about those two R's for overfishing. Rate of removal is greater than the rate of reproduction. All right. All right. So for part 2 now is to state 2 other factors that could affect the population. A for population A. So for population A, which is a chitin, one of the things that could affect their population is predators. Okay. So we could have predators would affect their population. That's one possibility there. We can also have pollution. All right. So pollution can also affect their population as well. All right, so pollution, and pollution, especially if use of like poisons, definitely. All right, so if use of poison, then definitely that could affect them. All right, I think I made a mistake. They have an L that I shouldn't have a L right there. All right, so pollution, for example, poison. All right, let's get back that into that. So for example, poison, use of poison, right? All right. Another possibility here, again, as this only asks for 2, so I'm going to give you more than 2, of course. Just, just help you out a little bit. Low tide. So if you have consistently low tide or long period of low tides, it could affect them because Low tide means that they're on the rocks and they can become dehydrated. And if they're dehydrated for a long period of time, then definitely that could affect their survival as well. All right. So even for low tide could also cause more predator to see them. Okay. So they can easily captured by predators as well if you have low tide. So low tide could connect with predators. All right. And the next thing here that you already mentioned, just you know, is that one, if you have a reduction in population X. So and it said other. So let me just put that one in because it's other. So one could be the reduction of population X, which is the first organism, which is the producer. But another possibility here could be an invasive species too, just in case you may have invasive species that may attack them. So invasive species. Okay. All right. Cool. So those are some of the things that could affect them as well, right? And of course, not only that, we could have also development on the rocky shore. So development on the rocky shore could destroy the habitat as well. So habitat destruction. Let me just put that one as well. So habitat destruction. And sometimes you have to kind of explain these as well. I'd prefer you to explain some of them depending on how you state them. Because the reason I'm saying that, why I want you to explain them, because sometimes if you just say like say habitat destruction, for example, how do the habitat destruction will cause could cause a problem, right? So you have stated that okay, for if you're developing like houses and so on, it can actually cause them the habitat to destroyed and all of that. So please explain in some cases that okay, this may be the reason, this may be the cause, and so on. All right, so just to make a note right there. All right, so we have 5 out of, and they asked for 2, so yeah. And any other sensible one, yeah, they're going to give you the marks, sorry, so you can write anything that is sensible, anything that makes sense, that can cause a population to be affected or destroyed, so definitely so, yes. Part E now is an explain how organism B is adapted to live on the rocky shore, and the organism we're talking about, if we go back to the question, let me just quickly slide up to it. Right there. Okay. Right here. All right. Good. So organism B, again, is the West Indian top shell, right? So if you notice the organism here, notice the characteristic of it, then some of the characteristic will help you to answer the question, how it's able to survive on the rocky shore. All right. So some adaptation that this organism has, and you're looking for 2 marks, so you need to state at least 2 things. And so one of those things you can talk about is the hard shell. Let's say hard shell. Okay. So it has a hard shell, and the hard shell will enable it now to do a number of different things. One, you can conserve water more. So it can conservation of water. Conservation of water. All right. So that's one possibility there for having a hard shell. Not only that alone, it can also withstand the beating of the waves. So withstand the pressure or beating, withstand the pressure or beating of the waves. Okay. Yeah. So it will really block the waves from actually beating them, but they're beating their soft bodies really hard, because remember they are mollusks. So the bodies are soft. So it will withstand the pressure or beating of the waves. All right. Another one that you can write as well. Let's put it right here. Wonder if I could take out waves and put it up top. All right, leave it as it is, not a problem. All right, so let's do here. You're going to be on the line a little bit, so be careful this one. Again, another adaptation of this organism is that it secretes, mucus. And the mucus that it secretes is that the mucus will go around its shell, and it will create a blockage or a seal around the shell. So they secrete mucus that seal in water. All right. So it's a secret mucus that seal in water, keeping them hydrated. All right. Seal in water, keeping it hydrated. All right, so the organism with those shells, they notice sometimes they go to the rock, you see them clamp onto the rock, and so around it you see like a paste-like thing that is the mucus that become dry, and it create a seal that keeping water in their shell and let them be moist. So even when tide is low, they will still have water inside of their shell storage. So that means of conserving water. Okay. So again, the secretion of mucus helps them to conserve water to keep them hydrated. All right. All right. So next adaptation here could have been that it also moved to the crevices of rock. So it could move to the crevices. So they learn how to find crevices of rock and will stay there. So move to the crevices of rocks for shelter. Okay. So that's another adaptation. They learn how to move to different parts of the rock or crevices of the rock for shelter. And it could be shelter from the direct sun. It could be shelter also from the beating of the waves. All right. And it could also be to hide from predators as well. So they kind of camouflage in those areas. So again, camouflaging could be another one too, if you think about it. All right. And another one here, which is kind of tied into this, the second one, is in secreting mucus. So the ability, so let's say the ability to stick to rock. All right. So the ability to stick to rocks. All right. Good. All right. So those are four adaptations there, four basic adaptation of that organism. All right. So we finished with that question. That's the final mark right there. All right. So the next question now is question 3. It said the diagrams show the outermost structure of a typical animal cell and a typical plant cell. All right. So on the diagrams now, those all the blanks is the outermost layer. So we know if it's an animal cell, it's the cell membrane, and this one will be this the cell wall, right? All right. So if it's outermost layer, cell wall, and cell membrane. All right. So it's on the appropriate diagram or diagrams, draw and label the following cell organelles based on the description given. All right. So we're gonna draw these structures now. So it's a one here. It's a structure which release energy. And the structure that release energy, that is the mitochondria, right? So that is the mitochondria, all right? All right, so the mitochondria is what is responsible to release energy by respiration. So I'm going to draw, and both cells will have mitochondria, right? So what you can do is to draw mitochondria in both cells. So I can draw one here. And again, you can draw more than one. All right, I'm just going to draw. Let's draw just 2. Let's do this quickly. And of course, you can speed up the video here to to make this move a little bit faster as well. So I just want to draw the mitochondria right here. Unless you want to sit and watch me draw. So you're gonna have something a funny little shape inside of it like that. Something like when you're making hot dog type of thing. All right. So yeah, like hot dog with we call it bacon. Yeah, so a bacon looking thing in hot dog. All right. But bacon don't go in hot dog. I don't know. But yeah, it's not something looking like that, right? Yeah, whatever, if you want to call it bacon, is fine. But yeah, that's a way I could remember it. And I know bacon don't go in hot dog, so don't kill me on that. All right. The next one now. So those are the mitochondria, and both cells have mitochondria. I know they said diagram or diagrams. The next structure now is the structure that controls cell activities. And this is the nucleus. All right, so this is the nucleus. Before I move on, it said that thread-like structures that contain genetic material, and this one is a chromosome. Okay, and chromosomes are found in the nucleus of the cell. All right, so and the structures now which contain green pigment, and this one is a chloroplast. So now we have 3 structures to draw. So nucleus will be in both. Chromosomes will be in both cells, in the nucleus of both cells. Chloroplast will only be in the plant. So just remember, we're going to draw all 3 of those, all right? So instead of going back and forth, we just remember now. Now, normally when you draw the nucleus, right? We normally shade them, right? But I can't shade them this time because we're going to put the chromosomes inside. For the animal cell, the nucleus will be centrally located. for the plant cell, the nucleus will be at the corner, one corner. It could be on this corner, the other corner, it really don't matter, right? The chromosomes will be on the inside of them, all right? And so we're going to draw some chromosomes like that. We're going to draw even number because chromosomes, they occur in pairs, all right? So I'm just going to draw that. And animal cell and plant cell don't have the same number of chromosomes at all, but I'm just drawing 4 of each, all right? So different organisms will have different number of chromosomes, all right? The other thing that they said to draw again was the, oh yeah, chloroplast. So chloroplast now, the plants will have a lot of chloroplast, a lot of chloroplast. You can draw many, all right? But you don't need to draw a lot because just, if you draw even one, it doesn't matter. Once it's drawn in the appropriate cell, it's straight. Now the difference with this now, all right, I should make this kind of scribbly so they don't confuse what I'm going to do now because I don't want to look at the chloroplast. Now the chloroplast now, they could look more elongated. The nucleus is more circular. But in the chloroplast, you can just draw some lines across like that, okay? So make it to kind of distinguish between the mitochondria and the nucleus, right? So draw some lines across like that, some horizontal lines, all right? So parallel horizontal lines, all right? Or vertical, depends on how they turn. All right, so the fact that you put some small lines in like that, that will be chloroplast, all right? The thing with the kind of a bacon-looking thing in the middle, that will be like that has to be the mitochondria. The nucleus now have this scribble stuffing like thread, yeah. So those are the chromosomes. All right, so that's all they asked us to draw, all right? And we finished with that. And they didn't say label it, they said just draw them. That's all they said. Draw them in the appropriate places. I guess when you look at the diagram, they don't see it. You get no mark for it. So make sure they're in the appropriate diagram, right? Now, for part B, let's explain the difference between a tissue and an organ. For me, again, I just like to have tables. So if I was doing this exam, this is what I will do it. And for 2 marks, I draw a line down here. And then what I'll do now is to put tissue here or organ here. It doesn't matter what I put on what side. Then I did something bad. Okay, yeah. So put tissue here. All right. And then I'll put organ on this side. All right, organ. Yep. All right. So I have tissue and organ, and so I could put a difference. I could say 1. I could say number them. So nothing is wrong in making a little small table, because you make your points organized or your notes organized. So tissues are made of cells. I'm gonna say this one made of cells, okay? And they're made up of the same type of cells. You can make a note of that. Made up of the same type of cells, made of cells. Also, and the organ now is made up of tissue, okay? Made up of tissue. Made of tissue. All right. Another difference here, too, is that the tissue, they are simpler. So they are simpler structure, while organs are more complex. All right. And I just like to draw tables when I'm looking at differences because I see the points clearer and better. And persons who are marking to will see them better and clearer, I believe, right? I think they may even love it too when they're drawing tables for differences. At least they see the comparison between the things that you're talking about. The next difference between tissue, they perform simpler functions. All right, so they perform simpler functions. All right, they do not carry out too much complex functions at all. But organs now, they perform more complex function. All right, perform more complex function. All right, functions. We should have functions, but all right, let's say function. All right, function or functions. All right, so next part of the question. And this part now we say that name the tissue which carries out each of the following functions. And for part 1, we say transports water in a plant. So which tissue transports water in a plant is xylem. All right, there's no need to even explain that too much because we all know about xylem, right? By now, everybody know about xylem and phloem. It's a bring about movement in animals, and what bring about movement in animals, the muscles of the contract. So muscles, muscle tissue, yes. All right, so muscles. All right. All right, so muscles. All right, or just muscle, whichever one. Don't matter if you pluralize it or not, but muscle, definitely. All right, let's say muscle because it brings about, so yeah, in terms of the tense. All right, so muscles brings about movement in animals. Part 3 now is a conduct electrical signals from one part of the body to another part of the body, and this is impulse, or neurons, or nerve. All right, so this will be neurons, the neurons or nerve. Okay, the neurons or nerve. All right, so part D now, it said state one difference between a plant cell and an animal cell not mentioned in the diagrams in question A, drawn on page 6. So what is not mentioned in the diagram? But the diagram didn't mention anything. The diagram were just blank, but no, we actually put some things in it. So the things that we place in it, I guess that's what they're talking about, because based on the structures, notice only one of the diagram actually having the chloroplast, right? Because the chloroplast was the only thing that is different with both of them. So what other thing different from a chloroplast? Because remember, let's go back and show you what I'm talking about, right? So, and that's something I have to really look at the wording that they use in these exams, so at least you know exactly what they're actually asking you for. All right, I'm up a little bit too high. Let's come back down to this plant structure right here. Okay, cool. So right here now, notice both of them have the nucleus, right? Both of them have the mitochondria. So the difference was the chloroplast. The only difference that we actually placed in the diagram was the chloroplast, all right? All right, so that's actually what they're talking about right there. That was not mentioned. All right, so difference between animal and plant cell now that was not mentioned in this thing. So again, you can just quickly do a little table, use a ruler. And this is a 1 mark. You don't need no table for 1 mark. You just state it. But of course, you know I'm going to give you some others, right? So I'm going to just give you one thing. So let's put the plant cell here. Let's put animal first, all right? Animal, doesn't matter which one I put first, and then put plant on this side. All right. I don't think they're going to stress you out if you have a little table to show differences. I mean, the person who mark in the paper may have a better time seeing exactly what they're saying than reading your long sentences. And some of you want to write, you write too much, you write and your answers hang off the page and all that type of thing is unnecessary, you know. They will need to see the answer and answer the questions directly instead of running on with these long paragraphs and epistles for 1 mark. And sometimes you write, the more you write, sometimes the more foolishness you write too. So you need to desist from doing that. Look carefully at the question, look what they're actually asking you, and try to answer the question directly, right? Don't try to run on. In paper 3, yes, by all means, talk, right? But for paper 2, answer directly as best as possible. All right, so yes, beside chloroplast, animal cell has no cell wall. So no cell wall, all right? The plant cell now has a cell wall, right? Has cell wall. And again, remember, I'm just saying that they ask for one difference, so you don't need to have a table for that or a chart for that. But for more than one, you can always do that, right? And next thing here is that for the animal cell is generally irregularly shaped. All right, so it is generally irregularly shaped. For plant cell, they are more like they're regularly shaped, and it is actually like a rectangularly shape. So you can say regularly shaped. So a regular shape, regularly shaped, and it's actually a rectangular shape, right? It's rectangular, all right. And another one here, another difference right here. Let's put a third one. Again, a third difference here is that the nucleus is centrally located for animal. So, centrally located nucleus. All right, so centrally located nucleus. Nucleus. And now for the plant now, the nucleus is on one side or at a corner. Okay, so the nucleus is at a corner. So the corner or side, all right? Corner or side. So whichever one you put corner or side, you find. Another difference here is that the animal cells, there's so many differences we have with plant and animal cells. You just need to know them, right? So we have small vacuole. As a matter of fact, they say vacuoles because animal cells may have more than one vacuoles. But the plant cell now, they have one large centrally located. So let's say one large centrally located. All right. So the vacuole is centrally located vacuole. All right. There's okay. Let's not put okay. We talk about chloroplast. So yeah, besides chloroplast, we can name those or actually state those, right? But again, they only ask for one. All right. But in case you may need more than one in the next exam, because all exam won't ask for the same thing, right? In fact, the exams may be different. They may ask you for these things in a different way, all right, or at least to identify them. So there's different ways they could actually ask you the same thing. So don't look for the same question that will never, well, I can't say will never happen, but more likely will not happen. All right. Now for number 4, it's the pie chart show the proportions of 4 nutrients, water, carbohydrates, protein, and fat in some common foods. And if you notice here now, they have a key, and the key for fat, those are the long horizontal lines. For fat, carbohydrates, those are more like the vertical lines. Proteins are the dot, and water is the empty space, unshaded regions. So let's go down to the question now based upon this. All right, so which food contains the greatest proportion of water? And for 1 mark, you're looking for one food that contains the greatest amount of water. Water is the unshaded part. Now, it's between eggs and milk. All right, and if you look at it carefully, really carefully, I mean, it's kind of hard to see the difference, to be honest with you, right? But if you look at it carefully, though, all right, oh, Lord. Okay, yeah. This would be milk for sure. All right. If you look at it in terms of how the amount that is remaining. All right. So even though this side may be bigger, this one side here look bigger than this one, but the remaining portion, this is actually smaller than the other part. So by measurement, I have to measure this really good. Yeah, but they look really, really close. But milk is the one going to be the answer anyhow, right? And even by knowing as well that milk contain about 10% more water than eggs. Eggs are around 70 something percent water. Milk is about 80 something percent water. All right, so yeah, so milk is the answer though. All right, they look really, really close, and I'm not sure if you are seeing it different than I am, but yeah, my eyes they look really, really close. But milk is the answer for this one. All right, milk is the answer for sure. It look a little bit bigger. And actually, line for eggs is a little bit. You notice there's a little bit slanted towards the right. All right. So yeah, it's milk is the answer there. It's a list 2 uses of water in the human body. So why do we need water in our bodies? So we know we drink water, right? We bathe with water, but bathing is not internal, right? It said in the body. So what are internal use of water? So we can use the cleanser ourselves, but it is external. So let's give you one. I could put it, let me start up here because I'm going to give you a number of them. All right, so one is for digestion, and that's I think that one is a very important one. Digestion is very important, and how it is used in digestion is the process called hydrolysis, right? Hydrolysis is the important function that water plays, especially for digestion, because hydrolysis, it actually breaking down the substances using water. Hydro is water, lysis is to split or to break down. So anything that is lysed, right, is breaking down hydro, water, so break down by using water. And digestion process uses water to make food simpler. That's why we produce saliva in our mouth when we're eating, or the food mixes saliva to get it moist so enzymes can work better. My next thing again, and I know you should love this one, you should know this one, it prevents what? Constipation. All right, so prevent that hard time in the bathroom. You have to be holding on and making noise to force out the feces. No, that's no. So definitely water helps to prevent that. So if you notice you're having a warm time releasing feces, then you can make it better by start drinking water more frequently. All right, and in larger quantities too. Right? Water is good for our bodies. We need it. All right, the next thing right here that it could do is also help to remove waste. So it helps to remove waste. So in other words, help to remove waste is actually excretion, right? So help to remove waste. And by this you can just put excretion there. All right, so it's excretion, helping excretion. All right, water also helps to regulate body temperature. So another one here is to regulate body temperature. Let's put it right here. Regulates body temperature. And how it regulates body temperatures is more than one ways. By naturally in the body, it will kind of make the body cooler inside the body. But not only that, if you're too hot, you also sweat. So it helps to control the amount of heat around the body as well by sweating. All right, so control body temperature. And again, by generally in the body, it itself, remember, because of high specific heat of water, it will absorb heat and it will lose heat. Take a longer time to lose heat as well. So it absorbs heat in the body. And also in terms of sweating, water is in sweat. Another thing that it could do also is to make blood flow easier. So it helps with the viscosity of blood. So blood won't be too viscous. All right. So it definitely will help the flow of blood. So helps blood to flow easier. All right. So it makes blood at the right level. All right. All right. Another function of water in the body as well is also to moisten the epithelial layer of the different parts of the body. So it moistens. I'm gonna give you an example. So moisten the epithelium of structures, epithelium for absorption. I'm just putting epithelium because epithelium could be on more than one structures. For example here, let me say, the alveoli. So example, alveoli and the villi, they have epithelium, they must be moist. So easy absorption or diffusion of substance across it. So example in the alveoli, all right, or the villi, all right. Alveoli, villi. Matter of fact, anywhere, even the cells, because the cells also must be moist in the body. That's why you have tissue fluid. All right. So very important. Villi, alveoli, the cells of a body in the tissue fluid. And also water helps to lubricate joints as well because the synovial fluid contains a lot of water in it as well. So the functions of water is numerous. All right, let's move on. Part B1 is which of these food would be best for correcting the deficiency disease, kwashiorkor. Now, kwashiorkor is the deficiency in protein. And the deficiency in protein, you have wasted muscles. That means you only see bones. So you look at somebody and only see bones. Not because you only see you see bones in person mean that they're actually malnourished. There could be other reasons, right? But malnourished and the lack of proteins, you see bones. You see the wasted muscles. That means you have no protein to help build the muscles anymore. The person will have a pot belly. A pot belly means a large belly. And you will see the bones, pot belly, and you sometimes see a large head as well. So that's the symptoms for kwashiorkor. So seeing somebody bone don't mean that they have kwashiorkor. That they could just be slim, right? Right. So let's go back to see which food they'll prevent kwashiorkor. Remember, that's protein. We're looking for food high in protein. And the food that is highest in protein are the dots. And here, beans. Yeah, beans is the highest one in protein. And eggs also have a lot of protein. Milk, relatively good amount as egg. But let's go down to see what they ask us. The most is beans. So beans could be our first choice. And it said, which of these food would best? It's the best. So beans, yeah. So beans has the highest amount of protein. So definitely beans will be our answer there. And it said, which two of the nutrients shown in the pie chart supply the most energy? Two nutrients. And without going back into the pie chart, I could just tell it right off, but it's carbohydrates, because carbohydrates and fats, they are the major ones that produce energy. All right, I make a mistake right there. Carbohydrates and fats. And a point to note here, just to make a note, that carbohydrates are our primary sources of energy, but fats produce more energy per gram compared to carbohydrates. So fat produce the most energy, but carbohydrates are our primary source. All right, just to make a note with that. So the body then will use carbohydrates first for energy. Then, if in case there is no carbohydrate, it will turn to the fats. and they actually get more energy out of fats compared to carbohydrates for the same amount in terms of grams. All right. Now, it's a name one chemical element that is common to carbohydrates, fat, and proteins. A one, but there are actually three of them that are common to all three. And so, carbon, you can list carbon, you can look, list H, or let me just put or oxygen. And it's a name, so don't put the symbols. It's a name. So, this carbon, let me just name him out over this side. So, this carbon, the carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen, any of these, okay? So please not just write the symbol. Notice when they say put the symbol or name, please follow the instructions. If you put the symbol alone, you're going to get it wrong because you did not follow the instruction. All right, you must follow instructions carefully throughout the examination. All right, please do that. All right. So part C now is the table shows the energy content and nutrient content of one serving of these cereals. So we have cereal A, cereal B, cereal C, and you see the different numbers going down. And here now, it said if you were trying to reduce the amount of salt intake, which cereal would you choose to eat? And salt intake, there's no salt listed here, but there's something important. Sodium is stated, and sodium is one of the major components in salt. For example, table salt, sodium chloride is table salt. Yeah, so the amount of sodium indicate the amount of salt. All right? And so you're going to go with the one with the lowest amount of salt. And so cereal C has the least amount of salt. So that will be our cereal right there. Cereal C. I wonder what cereal is that? Well, there's no way to know. All right, let's go to part 2. It's a John ate 1.5, which is 1.5, serving of cereal A, actually. Philip ate 2 servings of cereal C. Calculate the difference in the quantity of energy consumed by John and Philip. So the difference between energy consumed by both boys, John and Philip. Cereal A is 110 kilojoules of energy. So notice the energy content there. Energy is 110. And for cereal C is 85. So 110 and 85, A and C respectively. So let's go right here. This is the last part of this question. Oh, nice. All right. So John now is 1.5, right? And John ate cereal C. Let's say 1.5 now multiply by, that was a 110 we say, yeah. 110. And so this is equal to 165. So 110 multiplied by 1.5 is 165 kilojoules. All right, so we should be good with that. All right, kJ. All right, the next one now, which is by Mr. Philip. Philip now he ate 2 servings. So it's going to be 2 multiplied by cereal C, which is 85, as we mentioned. Remember that number? And that will equal to 170. So the difference between both boys now will be 170 minus 165. So the difference there is a notice. Look at the numbers. Just 5 more. So it's just 5 kilojoules difference. All right, so 5 kilojoules is the difference. So that will be the answer right there, right? So 5 kilojoules. 5 kJ. All right, so 5 kilojoules of energy is the difference between both boys, right? This is also kilojoules. There's no need for me to put that. Yeah. All right. Yep. All right, so there we go with that 10 marks. So again, folks, read your questions carefully. Make sure you understand them carefully. And make sure you apply your knowledge or the correct answer based on what they're actually asking you. So after this question, we have 3 more to go, right? And we finish. All right, I know it's close to the exam and you wanted to get a little rest. But nevertheless, let's put some knowledge in. All right, so the diagram here now shows some of the organs in the body which help to maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis is controlling the natural balance in the body, all right, or the controlled balance in the body generally. So anything that can be controlled in the body is a form of homeostasis. You control glucose is homeostasis. Control body temperature, it is homeostasis. Control the amount of water, it is homeostasis. Control the amount of salt, it is homeostasis. Control blood pressure, it is homeostasis. So anything that is controlled within the body, it is homeostasis. Right. All right. Homeo, same. All right, so A is a name the organ that on the diagram that produces sweat. All right, we don't even need to go to the diagram to talk about that. It is the skin, right? It is the skin. We don't even need to go back up. All right, this produces urea. There's no need to go back to the diagram. We know what this is by now. We know that the liver produces urea by deamination, and it converts excess amino acids to, right, in the liver, convert excess amino acid to urea by the process of deamination. All right, so produces urine, and that's the kidney. We don't need to go back up the diagram for that. You know, you are smart children, and you know these things already, right? Stores urine is the urinary bladder, right? Urinary bladder. All right, so we're good with that. There's no need to go back to no diagram to figure out where it is. You know these things. But for the benefit of if you missed the diagram, I'm just going to show you one last time, right? Okay. All right, so let's go to the next question now. Okay, I want to finish this real fast, right? And you can play this video in like a speed up mode in like 1.52 to make it go a little bit faster for you, so you get all the information quickly. So you don't have to be here, listen to my slow voice. All right, for B now, is to explain why we should drink more water on a hot day than on a cold day. All right, besides you're going to feel thirsty, you know your body naturally going to make you feel thirsty on a hot day anyways. So automatically you're going to drink it. But why though? And the question is why. All right, so the reason why is because the release, and let's put loss, the release or loss. The release or loss of water is greater through urine, through urinating. So the release or loss of water, let's put it that way. I'm gonna put it in that way. That will make a little bit of sense. All right, so the release of lot of water, release or loss of water is greater on a hot day compared to a cold day. Okay, yeah, I think that will make sense, right? Compared to a cold day, yeah. So the release or loss of water is greater on a hot day compared to a cold day. So if you release or lose more water on a hot day, all right, then definitely you have to take in more. And this is supposed to be by sweat. All right, so the release or loss of water, I should put by sweat there, is greater on a hot day compared to a cold day. Makes sense, you know, right? Yeah, so the release or loss of water by sweat is greater on a hot day compared to a cold day. And not only that, your body also go into the cooling mechanism. So you have vasodilation and you have sweating taking place. So your body will also want to take in more water to help to assist in the loss of water by sweat. All right. Yeah, so that would be good. All right, so part C now is that explain why the human body temperature must be kept as close to normal as possible. But isn't it everything should be kept close to normal? All right, so why your body temperature should be normal? Normal is always good, isn't it? No, sometimes we need to be more than normal. It will be extra. All right, so one is that enzyme for effective. I'm going too fast. All right, for effective functioning of enzymes. Because remember, if the temperature is too high, then enzymes will not work properly. They may become denature. So the effective function of enzymes, let's put another one here, and also function of hormones too, because hormones need to work at a certain temperature. If the temperature is not good, then certain hormones may not work properly because again, the structure based on their structures, protein structures and all that. So definitely for proper functioning of hormones. So let's say for proper functioning of hormones as well. So hormones need correct temperature as well, especially some of them, not all of them. Some of them don't mind certain temperature. All right. And even to produce certain cells, like production of sperm cells, also important too, right? So let me just say generally here, because this could be a general thing, to prevent damages to cells, because cells can become damaged if the temperature is too high as well. For example, if you have high fever for a long period of time, it could damage certain structure. It could damage your pancreas. If your pancreas is damaged, and you could have diabetes or you had serious problems. It could damage your brain cells, and then if your brain cells damaged, then bigger problems too. Yeah. Another thing in terms of having a normal blood temperature, it's also assists with the blood as well, the flowing of your blood. So let me just put it this way. To maintain, if I put it this way, going to be more better sense to you. To maintain the kinetic, or you may pronounce it as kinetic, to pronounce the kinetic energy of the blood. And when I say kinetic energy of the blood, because remember now, blood is a flowing liquid or flowing fluid. So if the kinetic energy is maintained, then it's going to flow at a certain speed, because high kinetic energy mean the particles flow faster. Lower kinetic energy means the particles flow slower. All right, so nice temperature will make blood flow better, and once blood is flowing better, then the nutrients and substances reach to the blood cells in a timely fashion for them to carry their function effectively. All right, so those are just a few reasons for you have a normal body temperature. All right, so next part of the question. No. Next part of the question. What is this saying? It's a D now, it's a D1. It's a urea is a type of metabolic waste, right? Urea is a type of metabolic waste. Explain what is meant by the term metabolic waste. Now, metabolic waste is any waste from chemical reaction, right? So it's waste produced. There's any waste produced from chemical reaction, right? And this chemical reaction must be in the body, from chemical reactions in the body. All right. Yeah. All right. So that is what it is. A 1 mark. And a matter of fact, you can say this chemical waste in the body, that's also suffice as well, right? But they come from chemical reactions. So any chemical waste in the body, they are called metabolic waste. All right. It's a name two other metabolic waste produced by humans. For each one that you name, state the organ shown on the diagram that produces this metabolic waste. All right, so we have a little difficulty right here now. Because if we name the organ that produce these metabolic wastes, we know the first one in the list here is urea. But they talk about urea just now, right? But we're talking about urea. So it's not urea they're talking about. So the previous question, let me just go back up to it. So you say urea is a type of metabolic waste, right? So you're not talking about urea. But just to make a mention right here that urea is produced by the liver, right? So urea produced by the liver. I'm just gonna put equal to liver. I don't mean that urea and liver is the same thing, but liver produces urea. And again, it produces by the process of deamination by converting excess amino acids into urea. All right. So another metabolic waste, and again, I'm not even sure if they really wanted to ask you which organ produce them, because the organs themselves are not really producing these things, but most of them produced by cells. But I want to clarify something. All right, let's put one as carbon dioxide, right? The carbon dioxide. Now, I don't want to make the mistake. Again, we need to follow instruction. It said, and make sure I highlight this for you. It's an organ that produces it. The organ that produces the waste. Not the organ that get rid of the waste. The organ that get rid of carbon dioxide is the lungs, but is not produced by the lungs. So there's a difference now, please. Please read these questions carefully. Because I know when you see other metabolic waste, you're quickly going to say carbon dioxide, and I know some of you may just write the lungs immediately. But the lungs is not what is producing carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is produced by all cells all over the body, including the cells of the lungs too. Right? But if you put lungs, they're going to say take it as an organ, and it is not producing carbon dioxide. It is responsible to take carbon dioxide out. So it expels carbon dioxide. All right? So it absorbs it from the blood by gaseous exchange, then release it out in the atmosphere. So let me just make a note there and say all cells in the body, right? So all cells in the body will produce carbon dioxide, when they respire, because all cells respire, right? Now, another metabolic waste that we have in our body is water. And water again is produced by cells all over our body. That's what I'm saying. I'm not sure if they intend to write the organ that produced them. So, okay, so water is produced by all cells in the body. I must make a note of that. All cells in the body. And so let me just tell you how you could answer this to make sure that that you get these marks, because you need to be also smart in answering questions as well. I'm going to show you how I would do it. So all cells in the body by respiration. So when cells respire, they release water as well. So what I will do, go back to my diagram. And so they have the lungs there, they have the kidney there, they have the skin there. So I will say carbon dioxide is my waste product, and the cells in the organ, and I put the organ first. For example, I put the liver, and I said the cells in the liver by respiration. Water again, I could put the kidney, and I put the skin, and I put in bracket by the cells in the skin after respiration. So things like that I will do, just to make sure that if there's a mistake in the question, because of course sometimes the exam could have a mistake as well, right? So just to point out this question, typically they would ask you what organ will release these waste products. But the organs that produce them, they are producing, carbon dioxide is produced in all organs, because all organs have cells, and all the cells do what? Respire. So if you list any organ, you get them right. Okay, you get them right, because all organs produce water after respiration. All the organs again produce carbon dioxide after respiration. Another one we could have here now that is a distinct one that is very, very clear cut with organ, and this one now is called bile pigment. So bile pigment is a waste product, all right, and it is produced by the liver. So the liver is what produces bile product, because especially when you break down certain cell parts that contain biles. And also you need to know too, because the liver will recycle old red blood cells and take out hemoglobin product out of it. All right, and that's why if you notice liver is dark in color, because it contains a lot of iron that is absorbed from the hemoglobin, and the body will use this iron to help to assist in make new red blood cells, right? And next thing to note, right, since we talk about metabolic waste, salt is a metabolic waste, but salt is not produced in the body. Salt is not produced in the body. But when there is excess sodium and so on, it will make salt, and the body will release it, but salt is not produced in the body. All right, we have to intake salt, but if we have excess, then the body will get rid of it by excretion. All right. All right, next question here now. Question number, what this question is now? 6. All right, so we're going to speed up a little bit now, because I want to finish this real fast, right? And I want to get this in time for your examination. So question number 6 is a diagram shows the difference in shape and position of the diaphragm and ribcage during breathing. Let's go to them. All right, so first diagram is inhalation. Second diagram is exhalation. So we have inhalation, exhalation. And it's on the diagram showing inhalation, clearly label the following structures. We have epiglottis, we have the lung, we have the diaphragm, we have the ribcage. No, people, I want you to be careful with this. They said on the diagram showing inhalation. So the first diagram is inhalation. If you dare go in this exam and label them on this diagram, you're going to get them wrong, because clearly you don't answer the question properly. You technically get it wrong, so you lose 2 marks by answering it anywhere. No. So instead of typing these numbers back, what I'm going to do is just kind of draw my line. So the epiglottis will be here. I'm just going to label that. Again, you will go ahead and you will actually draw the lines properly and label them properly. Again, I just want to do this in interest of time. I want to move a little bit faster, to be honest with you, right? I think I'm going a little bit too slow. All right, so the lung now will be here. Notice that structure I'm putting right there. That's the lung right there. That's the lung for us. All right, so let's go to another structure. And the diaphragm will be this dark line in here. This dark line, that's the diaphragm. And the rib cage, and I know most of you know all of these already. The rib cage is all of this structure. I'm just going to put a circular end. So that all of that is rib cage. The whole thing there is rib cage. So what you could do is put like a open bracket type of thing, like that, something like that. and call it the rib cage, right? So you put it on one is just a rib. But the whole thing is rib cage. I guess if you just label it here though, they're gonna give you the mark because they know what you're talking about, right? All right, so let's move on quickly to the next part of the question. I just want to move a little bit slower now to kind of decrease the time. Again, you can also play the video in a faster version. So you go a little bit faster and so you spend less time and so you can go through more videos, right? Now, describe what happens to these structures during exhalation. So the rib cage, what happened to rib cage when you're exhaling? Let's say you didn't know, but the good thing is they gave it two diagrams to look at. So if you're exhaling, you look at the diagram carefully. All right, I could tell you this, but look at the diagram carefully. Notice what happened to the rib cage when you're exhaling. The diaphragm actually go down deeper, right, and they get in. So notice the diagram. The rib cage actually is inwards and also dropping down compared to the first one, right? The diaphragm now goes up, if you notice it. So let's go on and write in our answers now, right? But the rib cage, when you're exhaling, the rib cage itself, it pushes down and also inwards. So down and inwards. The diaphragm now, the diaphragm relaxes, all right, and pushes up. So it pushes up or relaxes. So it relaxes and it also pushes up. All right, so part C now. Part C and part C1 is to complete the blank spaces in the table below to show the correct percentage of gases in inspired and expired air. And so carbon dioxide, let me just quickly clarify something right here, right? If this is saying 4 in expired air for carbon dioxide, 4%, right? If we see 4%, that means inhaled one going to be 0.04. Now, the reason I'm pointing out this to you, because if you see 3, because sometimes it could be 3 as well, and some exams you might see 3. So if you see 3 as expired air for carbon dioxide, it means the inspired one going to be 0.03. So those are the two values that they normally use, 0.03, and it is relating to 3% as expired, or 0.04 relating to 4 as expired air. Just to point that out. For oxygen, for expired oxygen, it's going to be 16%. All right. All right. So let us now go to the next part question. It says, name the gas that has the same percentage in inspired air as expired air. We know this for sure. This is nitrogen. You can look at the chart. It will show you. If you go back to the chart, you will see it there. It's nitrogen, but we're taking 78%. We'll release 78%, right? So there's no need to go back into the chart for that. All right, it says nitrogen. Mistake. All right, so part 3 now is to explain why the percentage of this gas is the same in inspired and expired air. And a very simple reason, what goes in is what comes out. But they say explain why. You can just put that what goes in, what comes out. Don't do that. We want to explain this properly. So the body now, the body does not. Okay, the body does not use it or make it. All right, so body does not use it or make it. So that means when it goes in, the body is not using it. And while it is in, the body is not making it anymore. So what goes in must come out. All right, same that goes in, same thing that's coming out. So the body does not use it, the body does not make it. So therefore, what goes in is what is coming what? Out. You can make a note like that at the end. All right, so part D now, it said if a person has stopped breathing, it may be possible to revive them by breathing exhaled air in their lungs. Explain why exhaled air is able to keep a person alive. Now, if you look at the percentage of the gases in it, you'll notice what I'm going to say right here now. So exhaled air, I'm going to start it out like this and say that exhaled air, space, contains a high percentage of oxygen. Okay, so exhaled air contains a high percentage of oxygen. All right, and in fact, how much percentage is it again? 60%. All right, so it contains a high percentage of oxygen, which is sufficient. So which is, say, sufficient um, sufficient to assist, let's say assist the body in producing energy, which is respiration, right? In producing energy. In producing energy or to stimulate the lungs, right? Producing energy or to stimulate the lungs. All right, so that's why the person will able to survive, because there's a great deal of oxygen still, even though we generally taking 21%, but 16% you can survive off that. You can live off that. You know, you're not gonna, yeah, that's good enough to make your body run. You're not gonna run as effective as how you should run, but yeah, you're gonna still run. All right, because the truth is, a matter of fact, you're gonna work right. I'm gonna tell you the truth. You're gonna work nice, because if you think about it, if you're taking 21% of oxygen, how much percent do you actually use up? If you think about it, it's only 5. It's only 5%. So you use 5% of what you take in. So if you're taking 16, you'd use 5% of that. See, makes sense, right? All right, cool. All right, let's go to the next question. The next question here is about what? Oh, quickly. 7, second to last question. Okay, so the diagram represents a cross section of a human eye, right? All right, so A is the optic nerve. Everybody know that. F is the cornea. So let me label what you might forget, and I know you know it because something that we have been through before. D is the pupil. All right, so D is the pupil. C is the iris. All right, that's the iris. And B is a choroid. All right, I know sometimes some students mix them up. The choroid, the outermost one, the last layer is the sclera, and the inner one is the retina. And this is the optic nerve, right? And E is our lens. All right, and where the lens, behind the lens, going towards the back of the eye, we have the vitreous humor. So all this space right is the vitreous humor. Where D is, that space is filled with a fluid, which is the aqueous humor. All right, so just to mention that. And then we have our suspensory ligament that connect to the lens, and the suspensory ligament go towards another set of muscle called a ciliary muscle in the eye. So we need to know all of that and the function of those parts. So we say name the parts label A, D, E, and F. I don't even need to go back through that. Let me just skip through that. Just go back to the diagram here, and you see all of them there. Okay, there's no need for me to go back and write them again. Let's just skip over that. All right, it's to explain the function of part B and C. So that's what I need to know now, what B and C is. So B is choroid, C is the iris. Okay, so iris and choroid respectively. So B is iris. All right, and let me just put B is iris. Let me go back. The function of B. Let me just make sure. I think I mix up this now. B. B is a choroid. All right, so B is a choroid, and C is the iris. Okay, I know I made a mistake. So B choroid, C iris. All right, let me go down and answer now. So B is a choroid. Let me just put choroid right here. All right, so B is the choroid. And the function for the choroid here is actually to absorb light. So you have more than one function, as a matter of fact. So the choroid absorbs light and prevents, or absorb light to prevent, let me say to prevent, absorb light to prevent. All right, let me slow down because I'm trying to type in too fast and type in pure foolishness. All right, so choroid absorb light to prevent internal reflection. All right, so internal reflection. All right, also the choroid as well. Let me just put it down at the bottom here. The choroid also supply oxygen and nutrients to the eye as well, right? So the choroid also supply oxygen and nutrient to the eye. And again, the choroid will have some blood vessels in it, so that's the next thing again, is also a kind of a rigid structure. And for part C now, which is the iris, so this is the iris now. Iris is part C. All right, and the function for the iris here is, a matter of fact, the iris is a colored part of that. I just want to mention that, right? But what the iris does that is a set of muscle that control. So the iris controls the size of the pupil. They control the size of a pupil. So when the pupil dilate or constrict, yeah, so they control the size of the pupil. Okay, they control the size of a pupil. That controls. So you know this is a control to control now. So control the size of pupil that controls the amount of light. That controls the amount of light entering the eye. All right, that was a speedy typing. Oh Lord Jesus. See when I type fast. All right, that entering the eye. All right, so that's the functioning of the iris. Now, the next part of this question now is a name the structure in the human ear which performs a function similar to that of the part labeled A. Lord, what is A now? Let's quickly see if I could go back. Okay, A, I see A. Okay, optic nerve. So in the ear now, what is similar to the optic nerve is the auditory nerve. All right. So the similar to A that performs similar function is the auditory nerve, and they simply just carry impulse towards the brain. All right, so auditory nerve. All right. So the auditory nerve, it carries let me take out that eye out of this thing. So the auditory nerve, it's what carry impulse from the structure to the brain itself. All right, good. I'm not sure if this question done because normally it's 10 marks at the end of the question, so this question has a next part to it. Yeah, it's the state two functions of the ear that the ear performs. The two functions of the ear, the two general function or main function. One is hearing. Yes, that's why they use the ear, right? So it's hearing. And what it does to hear is to convert. So it converts the ear converts vibration into impulses. All right, or just say impulse. All right, yeah, let's say impulses. All right, so it converts vibration into impulses, right? And of course, that's what's sent to the brain. The brain interpret that, and now you know that what exactly you're hearing. Like you're hearing my voice now, it was a pure vibration first, and then the brain interpreted to, yeah, we're doing some biology, and yeah, we're doing this with science with Mr. Knight, and yes, we're doing paper 2, 2016. That was pure vibration coming from my mic and my speakers. Now, the other one is balance. Balance. All right, and so balance now, the part that takes place, or no, let me say, the part that controls balance of the ear is actually semicircular canal. So balance, let me say by, and you don't need to say by whatever it is, just state the function to maintain balance, and this is, but I'm just want to give it this so you know it, by the semicircular canal, okay? So the semicircular canal is what control our balance, all right? And how we control balance, it contains fluid. So the semicircular canal contains fluid. And just like if you have a water bottle, and if you shift the water bottle side to side, you notice that one part get heavier, the next part get lighter. So the fluid is being shifted, and so it helps us to maintain our balance and stability. All right, next question here now. Thank God is the last question. And you must thank God too, yeah? Last question. I'm going to finish now. So the diagram below shows, the diagrams below show two different types of cell divisions. So we have two different types of cell division right here. We have cell A, which is mitosis. Cell B, it is meiosis. All right, I know you're good on these things now, so I know you're supposed to straight. It said now state the number of chromosomes in the daughter cell of cell A and cell B, I guess. All right, so the daughter cell, mitosis, produces the same number of chromosomes, right? Meiosis now produces half the number of chromosomes. Now notice that the cells, cell A and cell B, they both contain 10 chromosomes at the start. So yeah, so the daughter cells now are the cells that are produced. So both of them will produce, I say both of them will produce, that's not true. They can't produce the same thing. But cell A will produce 10 because it is mitosis. Cell B now will produce half the number, so it produces 5. So meiosis produces half the number of chromosomes. Mitosis produces the same number of chromosomes, all right, as the parent cell. Next part of the question. What term is used to describe the daughter cell produced by cell A? if it produces the same number of chromosomes as the parent cell, they call diploid cell. So this is going to be a diploid. All right, and cell B now is half the number of chromosomes, going to be haploid. And notice half haploid, half H, half the number. Yeah, diploid mean double the number. So mean the same number of chromosomes. That means they occur in pairs. So haploid mean half of the total number, which mean one of each pair of chromosome. Diploid now mean all the numbers, the full number, which mean the two chromosomes that form the pair. Because remember that chromosome occur in pairs, right? All right, so part C now, part C1 is a name the tissue, name a tissue in the body where mitosis takes place. There are so many tissues you could name. Matter of fact, all the tissues all over your body, except inside of the testes and the ovary, can work. But a general one here is a muscle. It said I'm putting muscle because muscle is a tissue, right? And it's a tissue, so be careful. Because again, I like to be specific based on what they ask, right? They did not say organ. They actually said tissue. So muscle tissue, for example, is one, right? Skin is an organ. But skin is where a lot of mitosis takes place daily because they lose skin cells on a daily basis. So mitosis occurs at the skin regularly. But I'm going to say muscle since I say tissue because the skin is an organ. All right, part 2 now. It's a name a tissue in the body where meiosis takes place. And again, they say tissue, not organ, because if you say ovary and testes, they are actually organs, right? So a tissue that produces gametes, that's where meiosis is taking place. This is called a seminiferous. All right, so seminiferous tubule. Okay, so seminiferous tubule is one. Let me say tubule. All right, tubule. And don't mind this red line. It's actually spelled correct, right? The seminiferous tubule. That is yeah. So that is a tissue right there. All right, the seminiferous tubules, and those are found in the testes. So let me just put in the testes, right? Because they are found in the testes. Just to make a note of that. All right, they are found in the testes. All right. Part D now. Again, so there are two places. Matter of fact, let me just say this before I move on, right? There are two places in human beings where meiosis actually occur. In the female is in the ovary, and in males it's in the testes, right? But since it's a tissue, I want to be very specific with this because the seminiferous tubules, they are tissues, right? The testes and ovaries, they are organs actually. All right, so I just want to be specific. If they say where generally, you just answer it on your straight. Now, part D now is a name two processes in living things which occur by mitosis. And a number of things happen in living things. I'm glad that they didn't say human beings alone because you're going to be limited to that. But one is growth. So all living things will grow. So growth is one process. Another one here is asexual reproduction. And again, that's not for us as human beings, but like in other organisms, like plants that reproduce vegetatively. Okay, so reproduction. Another one that you could put here is repair of the body, so repairing. And let's put repair or healing. Let's put that too, because when you heal, like I get a cut, yeah, which is a repair. So repair or healing, that's straight, right? Last one for some organisms, like lizard, the tail of lizard, and some worm, like the planaria. Planaria will do this, and it's called regeneration. All right, so regeneration in some organism like the planaria. If you cut the planaria, you actually regrow into a new organism. You believe that? Cut a small piece of a planaria, you get a new organism, and totally new organism. I wish I could do that. I could cut myself and make like 50 of me. So some could be reviewing chemistry, some reviewing bio, some reviewing physics. Yeah, and some will do other things, yeah? All right, so I could be teaching a lot of you one time, but unfortunately I can't regenerate. All right, if you lose a finger, you could grow it back. I'm very sorry that we can't do that. But thank God, we are just here for a short while in life to contribute to life in the best possible way. So we all will be expired at that time. All right, so part E. State two importance of meiosis in living organisms. So why meiosis is important? It's the last part. And the basic purpose of meiosis is to produce gametes, so production of gametes for reproduction. So let me just say produce gamete, produce gametes. It's a gametes for reproduction. All right, so that's one importance right there. Another one that I'm going to write here is also for genetic diversity, because it bring about variation. Meiosis bring about variation, right? So for genetic diversity or variation, let's say variation. All right, so genetic variation. So even among the same species, we can be different, all right, because of genetic variation. You know, the same father, same mother, but producing children that are not alike at all. That's awesome thing. So we're unique in our own way. Another one here, let me just put this right here, that meiosis is very important in doing this, is actually bring about repair. Let me say repair, reduce. It may help to repair, reduce, or let me say or eliminate, or eliminate. All right, or eliminate genetic disorder. All right, so for example, you may have a genetic disease, and you may, let's say disorder defects. Let me put defects. Yeah. So a genetic disease, for example, right, in a population, if you mate with somebody with a normal gene, that will, it can suppress that, especially if the disease is recessive, right? It can end up suppressing that disease, and eventually, by mating, the disease may become overpowered by the dominant genes, and so it reduces the effect of that genetic disorder within the population. For example, if a person is sickle cell anemia, right? So sickle cell anemia, if you have two parents that are sickle cell, then naturally you have a higher chance of a children becoming sickle cell. But if a sickle cell parent person have children or a child with a normal blood cell person, then it reduce the possibility of having a sickle cell child. So of course it can help to reduce genetic disorder or defects. All right, so we're in. This is where we finished. Thank you for being here. Again, nice. It was my pleasure. Be safe. Do well on the examination. Talk to you soon. All right.